commander of Joint Task Force Katrina, in which he coordinated military relief efforts in post-hurricane New Orleans. General Honoré founded the Green Army, a coalition of environmental experts and advocates to protect against pollution while fighting climate change and the natural disasters that it causes. Please welcome General Honoré.
Well, thanks all of you for coming today to discuss a topic that I think is impact everybody in the state of Louisiana because we see it on a daily basis that things are changing. And some of it is changing because of the impact of pollution. We've been blessed in this state with a lot of natural resources. The rest of the world realize that, and they've come here to take advantage of it. And it's created a lot of economic opportunities for people. It's created a lot of jobs. People have bought their homes, they've sent their kids to college, they left the farm, they moved into the urban areas, and it's made life better for a lot of people. We could all agree on that. That's not the issue. The issue is what's happening to our environment, our water, our land, and our air. The situation we see on Earth today, most of it was caused from 40 years ago. I went to Homer to talk at a Rotary Club one time, and I did not mention the word climate change, and I will not mention the word climate change today because it's a politically loaded word. If you're for it, people can tell you a political party, who you vote for, and when you go to vote, and maybe where you live. I focus on pollution. And I asked in that little Rotary Club, how many of you have places you can't fish anymore? How many of you have places you can't hunt anymore? Why can't you? Has it been polluted, General? I mean, they were really, you could see the anger in their face and their eyes. And I stayed away from using the word climate change. And all of us know places like that. When I grew up, we used to swim in Falls River and go there and catch buckets of fish and take it home and eat it. That's not advised anymore. So things are changing around of us. Some people call that just a general attitude toward climate change. And I don't go all the way with a lot of the progressive with the Green New Deal, but I know we've got to change. I'm aware of the fact that I came here today in a car that used fossil fuel, but it's a hybrid. It made me feel better. Not making a hell of a lot of difference, but I'm still using a car that used fuel. So I'm relevant. I enjoy going home and the air conditioner running. But I'm saying to myself, why the hell is Louisiana still using coal? We're one of the biggest coal importers in America, and we're exporting LNG. There's something significantly wrong with that picture. When we send billions of dollars a year importing coal to Louisiana to use for power, and we are exporting natural gas. And we have to export it in the form of LNG. That scares the hell out of me, folks. It doesn't make sense. And until 2014, this is why I'm apolitical, we did not export oil and gas. During the 2014, they went to the president at that time, President Obama said, hey, why don't we export some oil and gas? It'll improve the economy and it'll improve your legacy to leave a good economy. They went along with it. Old Mitch McConnell got into it, they got it, they got it done. And thus began the big LNG business that we see happening in America today. This is a reality. Go back, Jack. Go back. this is a reality of what rising sea levels and the impact it's going to have. And I'm not the only one. This is documented information, that part of America that's at risk. Now, there's some people in politics that said, oh, sea level rise, that's pretty cool. We'll have more oceanfront property. It's like a joke. It's not a joke if you live there. Just look at what the storms on the East Coast are doing. Just look at what happened when we have storms come into our coastal area. And oh, by the way, we exacerbate that by continuing to build more and more property in wetlands. Since I moved to Baton Rouge in 2010, much of Burbank was wetlands. Been reclassified through the mitigation process with the Corps of Engineers, and now there's subdivisions. What do you think is going to happen when we get another 2016 flood? All those places are going to flood. And it's not 2 or 3 months go by, they had an argument somewhere in East Baton Rouge Parish or in Ascension or Livingston Parish of people wanting to put another subdivision in a wetland. And the people who live there know, hey, that's where the stormwater goes. We don't want to put a subdivision there. Yeah, but we're going to put retention ponds. Don't worry about it. And it's happening because we're tying up the wetlands and putting subdivisions in wetlands. There are a few key words you want to look for. You don't want to live on Bayou Road. It's not a good idea to live on something called River Road. Or, as my son, live on Waterloo. That's not a good idea. There's a subliminal message in that. And watch a place called the Reserve. There's a famous subdivision not far from the Reserve. Why was it Reserve? Because it was a swampland. When I first moved here, people would go hunting in there. Now they put subdivision with retention pond. We're set up for a disaster. And it's most prominent along the coast when we see storms come. Much of the storms are getting more frequent. They're getting stronger. I think everybody can agree with that. And science tells us, look out, it's going to get worse. This is not going to get better. And these issues were exacerbated by the impact of global warming, which is contributed much to the oil and gas industry. It's not the cows. Leave the damn cows alone. It's the methane from the oil and gas industry, much of it from abandoned wells, much of it from the conversion of natural gas into liquefied natural gas that we're shipping overseas. And I'll show you a couple products in a minute we can talk to. Next slide, Jack. This is a problem, and we see it. We got a problem with air monitoring. We have a place between here and New Orleans that's been identified in the press and in the media as Cancer Alley. The official position of the state of Louisiana is there's no such place as Cancer Alley. Trust me, there is a place called Cancer Alley when you have 150 chemical plants between here and New Orleans. Create a lot of commerce, create a lot of jobs. The backside of it creates a lot of pollution. And what we've gone to the legislature for, what, for 7-10 years now? Trying to do air monitoring, rejected by the legislature. Our challenge is much of our legislators, their day job is working in the oil and gas industry. About a third of them are lawyers. Their day job is to defend and advocate for the oil and gas. Some of them are lobbyists for oil companies when they're not in the legislature. When we go to the legislature, the rationale in Louisiana is, well, I won't recuse myself because I'm in the oil and gas business. I know this business, General, and I know best what's for the state. Well, what about talking about air monitoring? No, if it's going to cost industry money, we ain't doing it. We don't want to put any burden on industry. The mission of the Green Army is not to put people out of business, but to have solutions for pollution. We've seen this happen. I remember flying into Los Angeles when I was in high school at Southern University, going out to see my relatives out there, and we were landed. You couldn't see the ground because of the smoke. And shortly thereafter, we came out with something called a catalytic converter. You fly into LA now, it's clear as day, crispier than kid. Because we found a solution for pollution. With air monitoring, we're saying, hey, we know you got to create this stuff. Half the stuff in this room has a DNA from Louisiana. The paint on the chairs or the plastic in them little cups, that's created from plants that generate that product that make those plastic things we use. We're all a part of consumers of what's created in those plants. We're saying is keep your chemicals inside your fence line. But even to do that has been a struggle in Louisiana to get active air monitoring. This is one of our members couldn't be here today, Louisiana Environmental Action Network, Mary Lee Orr, Kathy Waskerman is here representing. But this is a car that drives the roads along River Road and smell the air. There's legislature this year that said, hey, you can't use that data and tell people that you're smelling something in that car. It's technically approved. It was paid for by the EPA in a grant. But the state of Louisiana said you can't use the data from that car and share it with the people. That's the dilemma we have. There's an absence of embracing that there's a science behind this, and we can find solutions to pollution. And it should be done. Next slide. This is Lake Maurepas. This is another scale called carbon capture. It's even supported by the current White House. And it's a scale. The idea is to take carbon and put it underground underneath our aquifers. Who think that's a good idea? Who think that's a good idea? We're going to take this carbon, we're going to capture it, we're going to put it underground, and oh, by the way, Big Oil is happy with this because they're going to get a tax credit. What a concept. When you see the lion and the lamb laying together, you need to be suspicious, and we need to be suspicious. I got a call the other day from a lady in Vernon Parish. They want to put a carbon capture a quarter mile from 2 schools. What a dumb concept when you put carbon underground, under pressure, in old pipelines. This is a bad idea. And even in our own legislature, one of the biggest arguments we've had over the last 2 years over the rules for carbon capture. Are there Lake Maurepas? That's a bunch of Republicans, good Republicans, who said, hell no, not in Lake Maurepas, that's where our camp is. You're going to put this underneath the ground at our camp? There's old abandoned oil wells there. That's crazy. We don't want that here. And we went to some big rallies out there. The industry was so strong, the Louisiana Economic Development gave them money so they could hire up to 20 lobbyists to make this thing pass in the legislature, carbon capture. And it's still a mess. One of the most unpopular calls I was talking to the current governor's staff was over carbon capture. People call them every day. We don't want this in our neighborhood. They want to take one of the most pristine waters we've got and put carbon underneath it. This is a problem. And now it's moved up to Vernon Parish where they don't have a political voice. Because the lady talked to a legislator and said, well, don't worry about it. It's an unproven technology and it's not going to work. Keep me straight on time so I don't press my time. Give me a 5-minute warning. Thank you. Next slide. Drinking water in Louisiana. We are in trouble. We can't get this legislation to talk too much about it. Of the 1,250 water systems in Louisiana, over 400 of them are at risk. We depend on aquifers. If you go up to Lincoln and DeSoto Parish, they're in legal issue now because when I first moved here, we tried to get involved with the parish. The parish said no to a company out of Texas that wanted to inject fracking water in an abandoned well. The parish said no. Parish government said no. The Louisiana Department of Natural Resources and LDEQ said yes. Guess what happened? They've destroyed the aquifer in that parish. Now in a big mega suit, And you know what we hear at the legislature? Well, them trial lawyers. The trial lawyers are just suing that company. They destroyed an aquifer, something made by God, for profit, with fracking water. I was talking to the EPA administrator of the Obama administration, came to New Orleans and said, what are y'all do with all that fracking water? Well, General, we're studying it. So what do you mean you studied it? Well, the Congress has tasked us to study the fracking water to see the impact. I said, well, if you put fish in it, they die. If you put it on plants, what in the hell are you studying? But under that administration, they wanted to say, okay, let's go on with fracking, so we can export this stuff. You with me? So we caught in between, folks. The intent to do good and to do stupid. Because injecting that stuff underground is not safe. It's bad for our aquifers. And we've got an infrastructure problem. Our infrastructure is not built to deal with the impact of climate impact, the increased storm intensity of them. Our infrastructure for handling storm water is inadequate because we've added more subdivisions and we haven't improved those pipes. And we've taken away more of the wetlands for that water to go in. But our drinking water is in a heap of trouble in Louisiana. We're blessed in Baton Rouge. We got good water, right? We got, everybody agree to that? But it is at risk from saltwater intrusion because the salt water is getting inside the Southern Hill Aquifer where we draw our water from. And we've been through a big old fight with the last two administrations. We finally got industry off the Capital Area Groundwater Commission. Then the new administration came in and put it right back on. And our water is controlled by the Baton Rouge Water Company. I'm proud of the water we get. I'm proud of the price. We got good price. We got good water. But it's for future generations. Their position is that we've heard them say, in quote, well, if we lose the aquifer, we'll take water out of the Mississippi River like New Orleans. One of the attributes of Baton Rouge is what? We got good water. And we want to keep it that way. But we refuse to take industry off of the aquifer, which is continuing to put this aquifer at risk. Now, when you go north and you go to the aquifer up around Monroe, they manage that aquifer. If a new company comes in, somebody else got to stop using aquifer water. The spot aquifer. We won't do that in the capital area because the industry controls the Capital Area Groundwater Commission, and they're in partnership with the Baton Rouge Water Company, which is a good company. They just have an idea is that we're going to use it till it's over with, and we're not going to limit industry from how much they can use. And industry will say, well, we're people too. We got a right to that water. I think the water ought to be focused on human consumption and not industry. Now, just for the record, all the plants on the other side of the river, from down south, they use river water. But our two biggest users here in East Baton Rouge Parish is Exxon, which I use Exxon gas. I ain't got nothing against them. It's not personal. And the energy company, the two bigger users. In America, we got a problem with water because we use more water to water lawns than we do to graze corn. That's a sickening idea. The amount of water we use on lawns. We got issue with drinking water nationally. Look at Flint, Michigan. Look at New Orleans last year. Next slide, Jack. The issues we have with saltwater intrusion. These are the abandoned wells. If you go to a comparable site, LDEQ published places you can't fish in Louisiana or you shouldn't fish. To include the two lakes at the Capitol that have been polluted. They were polluted by Westinghouse. Governor Foster said, clean it up. Nothing happened. The last governor did get the EPA to accept those two lakes at the Capitol for a Superfund site for the EPA to clean them up. Could not get legislation to move on this since 2010, since I've been here. People working on it before that, including my good friend East Town, who's not here today. These are the abandoned wells. We closed some wells last year with some federal money. Most of the wells they closed were in North Louisiana. because they were easier to close. The swamp wells are harder to close. You saw something in the paper last week about the Department of Natural, what they call them now?
Energy and Natural Resources.
What a hell of a name. That is now led by a former lobbyist for the oil and gas company. That's who's leading, who's taking care of our natural resources. Our friend Tyler Gray used to be an opposition on everything having to do with controlling pollution. He's now in charge for the state of Louisiana. And they've come up with a plan to say, well, if you're going to build a well, you've got to put some money down. No. The state law is if you build a well, you've got to, in that same permit, you agree to close it. But what the big oil companies do is, when that thing get almost done, they sell it to a small company, an LLC. That LLC get the last 10 to 15% of the oil out, then guess what it does? It go bankrupt. It's a bankrupt system. He has legalized the bankrupt system. But the way it was written in the paper, you thought this guy came up with a good idea. We're going to have more abandoned wells under his process. And guess who back they're going to fall on to clean them up? You, the taxpayers. Because they do not have enough money because you got all these old wells that have. And Lord, don't go down to the Chapelai Basin. What we've done to the largest swamp in North America is shameful to see the number of abandoned wells in the Chapelai Basin. This is continue to be a problem. Next slide, Jack. How many minutes I got left? 5. Okay, a piece. This is the pipeline network through Louisiana. Notice these pipelines. Visualize where the Chapelai Basin is right over here. See where Lafayette is? Look at the number of pipelines go through there. Some of them go east and west, and they're taller than the levees. The Florida pipeline that goes through there is taller than the levee. It goes east and west toward Florida, come out of Texas and Oklahoma. Florida don't produce any natural gas. They get it from us. They save their pristine place for tourism. What a hell of a concept, right? They don't allow wind power in Florida. And they fly on solar. But they get their natural gas from that pipeline that goes through the Chapelai Basin is as tall as a levee. So it stopped the water from flowing north to south. And it disrupted and created dead zones in the Chapelai Basin. You ought to sometime go and link up with what we call the wild crawfishermen in the Chapelai Basin. What a group of men and women. They make their living there off crawfish. They'll take you in there and show you the devastation of what industry has done to that Chapelai Basin. Because this thing is holding water. Now you got hardwood trees growing up all over the Chapelai Basin, defeating the purpose of the Chapelai Basin, which was to deal with what? Our flood waters. And these pipelines, now look at the pipelines off the coast. The federal government, who in the hell gave the federal government the authority to tell oil and gas, you don't have to pick up your pipelines? They have authority to leave abandoned pipelines in the Gulf of Mexico. Now, who gave this generation that authority to do that? And what happens when the storms come? These old pipelines break. Some of them break from the attachment at the well. And then we expect Mother Nature to clean it up. It's not happening, folks. It's having a deteriorating impact on our environment. And this is just a part of it. There's a multi-trillion-dollar cost associated with cleaning up the abandoned pipelines and oil wells in the Gulf. And our government, both parties, all administration, have looked the other way. They've looked the other way. We can't keep kicking this chain down the road for future generations to deal with. This is going to have to be dealt with. It's going to have to be addressed. And no administration, yes, has taken it on. We saw a little work last year that said we're trying to take up some of the abandoned well, but that was just a token in a bucket of the enormity of the wells that need to be capped, and let alone the pipelines that constantly going in to include new pipelines carrying carbon, which is a very dangerous proposition. We had an incident up in Mississippi where the local town wasn't told they were moving carbon. They had an accident, and we had the fire chief come down there and give testimony for us. When they showed up at the point of where the carbon was leaking, their trucks wouldn't run because there was no oxygen. They had to evacuate their workers because there was an absence of oxygen. That's how dangerous pure carbon is. And we were talking about putting this underground where you may have old abandoned wells and this stuff could be seeking up. But go back to the point, abandoned oil pipelines in Louisiana are a problem. And we got pipelines running within 100 feet of schools. If you go on Highway 30, both sides of Highway 30 got pipelines. High pressure pipelines that's carrying stuff that make the world run. But we live with this at risk. You won't go see this in Massachusetts. You're not going to see this in Connecticut. You're not going to see this in Florida. We suck down the pollution and they get to use the stuff. Now, what's the impact on this? Next slide, Jack. Cancer risk. I didn't make this data up. People smarter than me came up with this data. We've got an outfit in Louisiana called Louisiana Tumor Registry. They're nice, mostly ladies run this for the state under the awesome banner of LSU. They work through the university medical system and they provide the data to the State Department of Health. Their rule is hide the data. Say, okay, well, tell us the cancer rate in St. John Parish. Well, we can't tell you that, Gerald. Because under HIPAA, we can't tell you how many people they got cancer because it would violate their privacy. Who ever heard of some bullshit like that? So we did get an exception with the help of Ms. Cathy and a couple of state legislators. We got an exception and said, okay, we'll get it down to the census tract level. And we got that data released for about 6 months. Then they closed it. This is what that data showed. Cancer is here. They released another study between Baton Rouge and Lafayette on the most probable cancer. It came back to be Caucasian men in their 50s with pancreatic and colon cancer. Where do most of those men work? In the oil and gas industry, petrochemical industry. We pay a price for the energy we produce and send around the world, and it's in the health of our people. It is real. I was at St. John Parish, and we had a meeting with the EPA and the parish president. I said, there's a cancer problem here, and the guy said, oh, the tumor registry said there's no cancer problem. I said, the tumor registry data is suspect. At the end of the talk, a lady walked up to me and she said, Gerald, my husband worked in the plant 30 years. He died last year from blood cancer. He died in the hospital, and the cause of death on his paper was pneumonia. Because he did die from pneumonia. But here's a person that had been treated for 2 or 3 years, went ambulatory, went home, then went to the hospital on his final few days until he passed. He did contract it. When you lay up in the bed, that's what's going to happen to you. Cause of death, pneumonia. And that's fine with the cancer registry. I hope those people live well because they report that stuff. And that's the way to do it. We've got to get the cancer registry in line to protect the people of Louisiana. Next slide. Liquefied natural gas. This was created by some people out of the Bush and Obama administration who thought it was a good idea for us to sell our natural gas. So it got to liquefy it. In order to liquefy it, you got to freeze it. And in that process, it created a lot of methane. I'll tell you what else it's doing too. It made Louisiana the largest methane producer in the Western Hemisphere. We produce as much methane in Louisiana now as all of Europe. That's a list we're leading in, methane production. And that's a sad state of mind, ladies and gentlemen. We ought to be concerned about that because methane is what's causing most of the global warming because it's the worst of the greenhouse gas. Is it creating revenue? Yes. But go down to Calcasieu Parish. Tell me if they have good roads. Tell me if they have well-funded schools or medical system or public housing. None of that. They don't have it. These companies get tax exemptions, and that money is going to Wall Street. It's not coming to Louisiana. We get very little benefit. We get a few jobs. And the impact it's having on the coastal fishermen, they're crying every day because of the impact of those big ships, and they go in and they're constantly dredging, and they're stirring up the water where the where the crabs and the shrimp are. Go to Calcasieu Parish and ask those fishermen. Go down to Plaquemine Parish where they're putting a new one there. I'm going to put 2 there. The impact it's having on the fishing industry. This is not good for Louisiana. It looks good on paper. It has no impact on our economy. None. Matter of fact, the last report we saw in the general administration, the tourist industry almost equal to the oil and gas industry in terms of revenue, real revenue to the state in terms of tax. That's the last study I saw. Next slide. Corporate subsidies. Look who lead the world, the nation, in corporate subsidy to oil and gas industry. Look who's the leader. Louisiana. Texas give 2-year exemption on fracking wells and oil wells. Louisiana give 3. Texas does not allow any tax exemption on schools. Louisiana allowed tax exemption on school. So you're putting the plant in, you'll create 50 jobs, you don't have to pay local tax. Texas does not allow that to happen. Texas got good what? Schools. Louisiana got what? Underfunded school. We got good teachers, we got good parents, we got underfunded schools. Next slide. Where else we stand? I don't take any pride in showing this, but just the impact of when you got industry dominating your democracy as a process. This is what happened. This is what happened when we listen to industry. And all our rules are geared toward them. This is what happened to us. This is not a good list. And we're leading in methane production. Next slide. This is another mess. This is the old sand plant down in St. James Parish on the left, and this is over in Gramercy. That is a nightmare about to happen. It's about a 200-foot high wall that was created to keep industrial production of fertilizer. It creates the radioactive slush. They're storing it in a pit above ground, right above Blind River. What's going to happen when that damn levee fails? Would somebody tell me? Hello? We had a scare 2 years ago. The farmer who raised sugarcane said, "Hey, there's water in my cane field." Well, they went out and looked. Oh, hell, it is leaking. This is a disaster that is going to be of biblical proportion with it. This will destroy Blind River. And you know where the Blind River going. This is the motherhood of our catfish industry in Louisiana. When that thing breaks, and it's going to break. The one on the right is the aluminum plant. We try to get the LDEQ to close this. Say, oh no, we need the aluminum because Ford side they're going to make aluminum trucks. So that plant should have been closed 30 years ago. There's this big old pile of orange stuff. If you ever fly over it on the airplane, it scares the hell out of you. It's a future Superfund site. At the end of the general administration, we finally got him to go back and reinstate the people who test for mercury. And they found mercury. There's no safe level of mercury. And he put some testers back in. And we've got documented evidence that that dust from there has mercury in it. But we allow this stuff to come to America. It's processed. then it's put in a pile in that parish. You won't see that in Massachusetts. Hello? You won't see that in Florida. They don't want that there, but guess who's sucking it down? The people of Louisiana. That's why, folks, we got to find solutions for pollution. We can do this. And some of these legacy operations, your grandkids going to have to live with this. That's the sad part about it. We got another slide there, Jack? Yeah, this is another one, the Chevron doctrine that was changed by the Supreme Court. They basically tell the agencies, hey, you got to come back to us. You can make a ruling, but you got to come back to us. So now Clarence Thomas is going to decide if you got to clean up that oil well or not. Oh, Clarence is going to do that. The last time we had the government in charge of this thing about the Casanova River before we got the Clean Water Act, the river caught fire in Ohio. Caught fire. Don't worry about it. Mother Nature going to take all of that. Don't worry about it. The river caught fire. Thus, we end up with the EPA, Clean Air and Clean Water Act, and then Ronald Reagan, one of the most prolific ones, said, hey, you got to take down that damn acid rain. The trees up the Northeast are dying. And they took it down, right? When we get the right people with the right voice to make it happen, happen. Chevron doctrine just set us back another 50 years. Because they get people at the local level thinking they can tell the EPA no. I'm done. Next, one more slide. We'll go to questions. That's it. That's the solutions. Thank you very much for listening. Yes, sir.
Realistically, do you see any way to turn this around? I know you have these solutions, but I would say that the odds of most of that happening are pretty low. Is there any chance for Louisiana to have a different future?
Yeah, I think we got to get our young people who's going to try to not have to work the solution to this. I know they're all concerned about raising their kids and getting the big SUV and putting the kids in the right school and making sure they wear helmets while they're riding the back of the car. But they got to get involved with this. Because the old heads are like me, they're not going to change. My generation won't change. We got to get a new look at government. We've got to have a policy of recusal in the legislation. We can't have a legislature that is at the beck and call of industry. The job of legislation under Article 9 of the Constitution is the safety of the people come first. That is not the case now in our legislature. And there are good people down there, don't get me wrong. But when you go to a Natural Resource Committee meeting in the House, and we're talking about nasty, dirty air, and this state legislator, very prominent lady, looked back at you and tell me, he said, well, General, that old stinky air, that's the smell of money, General. And all the old boys in the room laughed. They thought it was a good hoo-ha. We ought to have a cultural shift in Louisiana. We need to get new people, young people in the legislature that will respect something like recusal. I'm in the oil and gas business. I can't be up here. I was in one committee meeting where the chairman of the committee came down to present a defense of abandoned oil wells. This guy's the chairman of the committee. And he came and we talked against his bill. Then he went back up and took charge of the committee. Guess what vote we got that day on the abandoned oil well? No. And he sponsored the bill. He's in the oil and gas industry. He lives in the same university club with me now. Nice guy. We laugh and talk about that all the time. But we've got to get our legislature from under the thumb of the industry that they're charged with regulating. Because much of the issues we have are by Louisiana law. You talk to our state agency, and they'll show you a Louisiana law that allows people to leave abandoned oil wells. Hello? Any other questions? Yes.
Regarding the people that own all of these, I know that there's been an issue with pulling together collections for unpaid permits, unpaid fees, fines, all of that. I know that former State Treasurer John Kennedy, now our state senator, our U.S. senator, wanted to be able to have one central collection agency to be able to collect all the money that's due to Louisiana. But the legislature over and over would not pass that. So I'm wondering if all those wells, all the spots where those abandoned wells are, has anyone put together a list of the actual ownership, maybe the initial ownership, but the other ownership, where you cross-reference those, and if you see, let's say my name or anybody else's name come up repeatedly, they do this repeatedly, why wouldn't they be denied a permit? Why wouldn't they be denied, perhaps sanctioned or somehow fined by the state of Louisiana that we don't want your business? Go take your business somewhere else because you've never paid fully what you owed us to begin with. Where is that compilation of information, and the media could actually maybe share that? It's public, if it's public record, and I assume that it is, it's just a huge job to pull it all together, but it looks like repeat offenders to me. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, if you track somebody who's a robber, you know, they're just a thief. You can track, if you can track every one of their victims, you're going to see commonality. And that to me looks like an overwhelming amount of commonality of the criminal who is doing this to our state.
Well, you've stated it well. And in there, there's an example. Well, we followed a couple companies. They went Metairie, then they changed their name and went to Lafayette. And when the reporter caught up, and they went Monroe. And the guy just said, yeah, we got a different CEO, but it's the same group of people. And they go to two states. They said, we're going to put this well for future use, or we're going to turn it back into the state because it's no longer producing. And then the state, by legislature, is obliged to take control of it, and then they go into a priority that's set by state-appointed officials in the oil field committee, and they determine which ones are going to be closed. And they do some very nefarious things. For some reason, a year ago, they closed a well owned by Exxon in the Chaffalaa Basin. Come to find out, they want to do carbon capture there. So you're not supposed to close a well for a company that's still operating. So
who actually regulates this? Is it DEQ along with the federal government on that side? Because it just seems like you have these same people. Like, who would want to do business with them?
Yeah.
If they don't follow through on what they're supposed to do regulatorily, why would you want to be a partner with theirs or subcontractor with theirs?
The name of that is the Natural Resource and Energy Committee, right?
Department of Energy and Natural Resources.
Yeah, it got a new name. But they operate that with a committee. And we had a big meeting with that committee about 2 years ago, and Randy Henry set it up for it. And most of them came in and said, this is not sustainable the way we're doing this. We got too many wildcatters or LLCs come in, get these wells, then they go broke. And they're leaving the burden on the state to try and operate with a very small fund. But when you go back to the law and the permit, that's why the big lawyers have been successful in the parishes. In some of the parishes where they went after the big operators, and they're going into settlements now in the parishes because they knew who the original owner of that well was and who owned the pits. And they've been successful in the parishes. They're going into some litigation and going towards settlement because they're paying off because they know they left it. But many of them sold them to LLCs that then change their names. They go broke, then it end up on the burden of the state. We got to deal with that. You know, 42% of the Louisiana budget come from the federal government. But you hear people talk at the Capitol, you think the federal government is our enemy. We got to figure that out. And we've got to play by the rules. Why? Most of us may not have a young, well, some of us, I see some young people in here. But most of us always, when this gets really bad, we're going to be gone. And that's my concern. Because the problem we're dealing with today was created 40 years ago. Devil's Swamp, north of Southern University, was created 50 years ago. The biggest polluted area outside of the Chaffalaa Basin, created by the oil and gas industry, and it's still polluted. Still there. God bless y'all. Any other questions? I'm positive on America. They will fix this. But I don't think it'll be this generation. Yes, sir.
On a small scale right now, you were talking about the chapel out.
Yes, sir.
I've been on the commission since I was 20-something years old.
Wow.
Everything started good. The main problem was oil companies putting fall bank, digging canals, and not leaving opening so and changed the rule. Because now nobody can figure it. They're blaming the Army Corps engineer because the swamp is low right now. When the water was high, it's got some canals you can't even run in.
Wow.
Fish are only biting where they got moving water.
Right.
So people, you love tackling fishing right now, find them in some places not. That's the federal government itself, the Army Corps engineer. You probably had a lot to do with it. What can be done? You got solutions, and I like that. And I'll offer to help the teachers should do whatever. Find the truth. There's got to be a happy medium.
Well, I get a call about once every 2 weeks from a fellow named Harold Shuffler. Mr. Harold Shuffler out of Lafayette is probably the predominant expert on and what he tell me is they're not putting enough water in dry time in the Chaffalaya, and that water is slowing up. They keep pushing it toward New Orleans because they don't want a repeat of what we had last year. But unless we put more water in the Chaffalaya, part of it is going to become just dead water. And unless we get a hurricane or some big flooding that flushes it out, the Chaffalaya is being degraded as we speak from the conditions you just mentioned with not enough water flow. But that flow is set by the federal government. That flow is set by the federal government, dictated by 2 senators who tell the Corps what the hell to do. And it's more important to them to keep the flow going through New Orleans, to keep the ship channels running so bigger ships can come in, than it is to keep the flow going through the Chaffalaya River. But it would be worth it at some point in future time to get Mr. Harold Shuffler to come give y'all a briefing on the Chaffalaya spillway and what's happening to it. He is a subject matter expert, and they come, even the Corps goes see him for information about that spillway. But you're very right, sir, in your observations. You're right in your observations. Thank you for that question and comment.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for listening, folks.